Do what I say. Don't do what I do. Jesus' second coming. And watch out on another episode of the Bible in 1 year with the preacher's husband. Today we're going through Matthew chapter 23 and Luke chapter 20 and 21. Tomorrow we're going to do Mark chapter 13. So let's dive in since there was a whole lot of reading today. So, our first section here is about religious hypocrites and Jesus denouncing them. Now, Jesus did not intend to impose all of the teachings of the Pharisees on his disciples. After all, he did criticize many of their beliefs. His commands here meant to obey the Pharisees' teachings whenever they accurately interpret the scriptures, but don't do the things that they do that are not within the law. So we get to verse 5 here, and it says, they do everything to be seen by others. They enlarge their phylacteries and lengthen their tassels. So I read this, I'm like, what in the world is a phylactery? I have no idea what that meant. So I looked it up. Phylacteries are actually small boxes containing tiny scrolls of Exodus chapter 13 verses 2 through 16 and Deuteronomy chapter 6 verses 4 through 9 and also chapter 11 verses 13 through 21 specifically. They were worn by faithful Jewish men on one arm and on the forehead. Now, tassels were made of blue or white threads, and they were worn at the four corners of the outer garments. Now, the Pharisees enlarged these phylacteries and lengthened the tassels in a bid to appear more pious than others, since theirs were longer than their. Clearly, they were more pious than other people, right? Well, okay. So, what if you say so? We get to verse 8. It says, but you are not to be called rabbi, because these are the words of Jesus here. You are not to be called rabbi because you have one teacher and you are all brothers and sisters. Do not call anyone on earth your father because you have one Father who is in heaven. You are not to be called instructors either because you have one instructor, the Messiah. The greatest among you will be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. And then there are many words of woe. So Jesus prohibited the use of honorific titles here for spiritual leaders that might encourage a sense of superiority in them or detract from the reverence that is properly due the Father and the Messiah. Sometimes I think we still get this wrong today in our churches. We consider our pastors and our reverends as people who are higher than us, but they're just people just like you and me. Giving them these honorary titles is not something that Jesus looked up to and exalted. So maybe that's something that we need to rethink in our churches. Then this is followed by many, many woes. There were at least 7 or 8 woes here. And the one in verse 25 stuck out the most to me. Chapter 23 of Matthew, verse 25. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup, so that the outside of it may also be clean. So what in the world does that mean? Well, some first century rabbis, they used to debate all the time whether cleansing the outside or the inside of a vessel was more important, but Jesus cited this to illustrate their obsession with ritual purity and their neglect of the inner spiritual purity. So that was very interesting to me. And of course, he ends it by his lament over Jerusalem, and in verse 39 where he says, for I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And did he ever. Now, we're going to move on to Luke, and we're doing chapter 20 and 21, but a lot of this is the same stuff that we read. So I'm going to move on to chapter 21, verses 25 through 28 here. It says, then there will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars, and there will be anguish on the earth among nations bewildered by the roaring of the sea and the waves, People will faint from fear and expectation of the things that are coming on the world, because the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. But when these things begin to take place, stand up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is near. Now, the signs and the sun, moon, and the stars, they're probably referring to Joel chapter 2, verse 28 and 31. Now, when I read this, I thought about Joel chapter 2, verse 31. Didn't think of 28, but I did think of 31. And go back and read those two verses if you have a chance to. Now, these cosmic effects here that it's talking about will cause great anxiety among the world's population. Not that we don't already have full of anxious and anxiety and all that kind of stuff going on in our lives to begin with. Now, the second coming of Christ is described in verse 27 in words that echo the prophecy of Daniel chapter 7, verse 13, the Son of Man coming with great glory, and he talks about the cloud. This passage is also cited in Revelation to Christ's return. Revelation chapter 1, verse 7, in relation to Christ's return. Now, instead of cowering in the face of these signs, believers should be encouraged, because they indicate that the divine plan for redemption is being completed and the advent of the kingdom of God is near. It's like watching trees sprouting leaves in the springtime and knowing that summer is on its way. Because for me, summer is my favorite season of the year. So that's the way I look at this. And then the need for watchfulness. This is a very important part to me, and it's a very important thing. It says here in verses 34 through 36, be on your guard, that so your minds are not dulled from carousing, drunkenness, and worries of life, or that day will come on you unexpectedly like a trap. For it will come on all who live on the face of the whole earth. But be alert at all times, praying that you may have strength to escape all these things that are going to take place and to stand before the Son of Man. Now, that day here refers to the time of Jesus Christ's return. Now, those caught up in the worldly lifestyles that we live, our carousing, our drunkenness and such, or the worries of life. How many of us are just worried sick about things that really just don't matter in the long run? We're going to be caught completely off guard when Christ comes back if we don't stop being so consumed by the world and the worries of the world. The proper outlook is prayerful alertness, which will prepare the believer to stand and not be ashamed before Jesus when he returns. So, I hope this has helped you in your studies tonight. If it has, click that like button and subscribe button. Of course, click the little jingle bell so you can get notified the next time I upload a video. And hit that little boxing glove if you're rumbling with me on Rumble. And we'll see you again tomorrow for another episode of the Bible in 1 Year with the Preacher's Husband. I'll see you then.